Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and Merry Christmas to all.
Yay!
We have finally made it to the big day, of course. I hope that your Christmas morning, whether you were spending it with friends, family, or by yourself, was wonderful and fun and enjoyable. I know we've been having a good bit of fun, being new fathers. I'm sure there's a whole lot of goodness on either side of the fence here that we've been experiencing.
It's
Um,
always been fun. Candy canes and
yes,
Christmas presents all
a-
around.
absolutely, yes. And that brings us to the grand finale of December to Dismember here. And this is kind of a fun little project that we wanted to workshop into this. And, we do have, to be upfront with you guys, a little bit of an idea to make this maybe a wider series of something that we'll do periodically on the channel. We'll kind of get into more details about that as we kind of formulate it, but this is almost like the testing ground for that, where we're going to sit here and talk about, since we just went through all the Silent Night Deadly Night films, what are some ideas or ways that this series could have, maybe even should have gone. As creatives ourselves, we can't help it. We start watching stuff, or we are into a certain property, something that you love, and your brain just starts moving. So you start thinking, this is what I would do. This is where I would take this. And it's our channel, and we figured, hey, why not? Let's put this out into the ether, see what people think, and of course, as always, see what you guys would do. If you like some of our ideas, let us know. If you have ideas of your own, also let us know. Drop those comments down below. This is very much a communal experience here. We want to know, do you guys like what we're saying, or do you guys want something different? Would you take it a different way? We got a little bit of fun fan casting here. We know we're going to go through and pick certain members of the crew, specifically directors and things like that. So it's going to be quite an adventure. So I'll throw things over to Luke here to kind of kick us off, since this was definitely something as an idea that you pitched as far as the grander whole here, even though this is basically our trial run.
Yeah. So I think this idea came about when we did Spawn, and it was kind of looking at it, and we talked about it in that podcast where it was like I started kind of pulling back a little bit, thinking, should we do this? Because I gave it a watch, and I was like, there's a lot left to be desired here. And then me and Dylan had talked, and I was like, should we, we can come up with a concept where we take these scripts of what could have been and kind of chop it up in a sense and make it our own and improve it in the ways that we see, being big fans of certain properties and where we want to go with certain things. And as Dylan was talking about, being creatives, we always see a different way of maybe this could have been done one way or another. And it's like, and I think whether you make content, you watch content, being so close to things like Silent Night, Deadly Night, all these kind of, I don't know, B or C level horror films where, you know, it's a communal experience. I think a lot of people always look at these things, especially when we get into, the fourth or fifth installment of something and be like, oh well, this series could have easily been saved, just with some light reworking and a clearer direction, you could have really done something. And I think that's kind of where we sit with Silent Night, Deadly Night, where with that first film, I think it was the first, or was the second one? I can't remember which one this discussion happened
It
on, where
was
we
the
kind of
second film.
the second one, okay, where we started kind of we had to Dylan edited those ones, so he had to do some light editing because we pulled back a little bit, where a discussion happened and we started kind of figuring out a pretty good idea, at least where we thought maybe this franchise should have went, as opposed to where it actually went. So it's like I think two leaves it off so strong, where it's like there's so much potential there as to where we can go, and then three instantly kills it. Where as soon as they open up and he's in a coma and we're seeing his brain, it's like, well, there was so much potential leaving off of two, especially when Ricky's eyes open up. It's like, okay, where can this go? And then they just kill it.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate the way that they kind of took the series after two. We have our gripes with it. I'm not going to sit here and rehash it. If you want to hear our full thoughts, go ahead and check out that video. If you're just stumbling across this, it is up on the channel as well as our reviews for every film in this series. But yeah, I mean, like, it's still one of those movies where it's like we can still go places from here. There's still enough connective tissue from the first movie that we can still include it, and I think. We decided that, that's our jumping off point. If we're going to kind of just get started into things, like that's really where we're going to take this. So, in our minds, the first and the second film are still canon. That is
Hmm.
still everything going on. We are going to be basically doing the requel route in a sense, where we're deciding where the timeline is going to pick up here. We're not necessarily remaking the film at all. It's a very original idea, but we are going to, just kind of take it back because, good lord, to try to connect any elements of three and
No
then
way.
four,
Not going to happen.
there's nothing. Now, you know, I've thought a little bit more in depth about a couple things. Maybe I'd put a little couple of Easter eggs in there for certain things. One of those things being for me, well, hold on, you don't know, is Pedos would be a toy store in the background of a couple of shots in town. I thought that that would be a nice little rivaling toy store to Ira's, and things like that, to just have that there. So if you're an eagle-eyed viewer, you might see that in the background and be like, oh, that's Silent Night, Deadly Night 5 kind of thing there. I also, in my script, have the use of a flamethrower, just like in the remake. So, a couple of little nods, winks and nods. If you were up on the series, if you did a whole watch through like we just did, you'd probably pick up on those things.
Yeah. Yeah, and that stuff's fun. It's so small, and it's just that little nod, which I think kind of going this route with it, you probably need those as where the way we're doing it here, where we're you know canon is 1 and 2. I think that's the best route to go here, where um the other stuff just doesn't really matter, and they paint themselves in a corner with 3, and they really take that Ricky personality that was established in 2 totally out of the game. And again, it doesn't make any sense because he was not shot in the head. So they really could have done anything they wanted, and then they just cut it off at the knees and had to do standalone installments, which was just a real shame, as we are seeing the potential here. Yeah, so I don't know. I think this is the best route to go. Plus, I always love when people take on the task of actually including the sequels rather than disregarding, everything, and then just as we've seen with David Gordon Green's Halloween, where it's like those are so iconic. Where Silent Night, Deadly Night, I suppose the installments post 2 are not so iconic.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And, we even said it with our review of Silent Night, where it's like this is a series that I feel is ripe for a remake or a
Hmm.
recalibration because it didn't hit with everybody. It has its select audience. There's a lot of people that love those first two films, and I hardly see anybody talking about it. And I mean, even just the analytics from when we're watching this or when we're recording it, I should say, number 4 has been posted, and it's doing the weakest of all of our reviews so far. So
Yeah.
it's like I think that it just comes to a fact of a lot of people probably past 3 have no idea, like really have any interest or any kind of inkling to explore that. So it's kind of like, why would we dive in there and try to make that stuff work? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily if there's a hunger there to consume a lot of these other Silent Night, Deadly Night properties.
Absolutely. But without further ado, we can kind of get into a little bit more of the details here. Starting off with the title of the film, I think we both agreed this title seems to work. Obviously, we're already pitching it that we're picking up right after 2, so this would be the third in the trilogy. And I decided to go with Silent Night, Deadly Night, Last Christmas.
Santa's watching, Santa's waiting. Christmas Eve is slowly fading. Can you hear him in the night? Close the door, turn out the light.
kind of a play on the whole Last Christmas song. We're going with that. I think a lot of the films in the series have tried to kind of maintain that. The third one being "Better Watch Out," which of course is a very famous line from a Christmas song itself. I just think that this one would be a nice way to kind of cap off this trilogy. The way that we structure this, I don't think there's any real necessary to reason to keep it going. We really just want to kind of bring the Billy and Ricky storyline, which we thought was going to be mostly the heart of this series, to an actual conclusion.
Yeah. And that's where, we thought that direction was going to be happening in this, and it didn't really happen. I love the title, Last Christmas, just because, it kind of gives that finality. I think just by hearing it, you know what you're in for, where it's like, oh, well, hopefully we're getting, Billy and Ricky back here, and for that culmination that we've all been waiting for. So, and as soon as you said, Last Christmas, obviously I was at, before we were recording this, I was singing the song. So I think it fits so well, especially watching the remake of Silent Night where they had Up on the Rooftop playing. I think it's really nice to kind of intertwine the music of the holiday as well, which obviously some of these films did not even make use of any of the themes for Christmas. One of the things is you kind of asked me right before we recorded if I had a title, and I was like, just come up with something. So I didn't really have anything. I'm gonna pitch you one that I just came up with. I don't know if it's original or not, so hopefully there's not another horror movie titled this, but maybe Silent Deadly Night Sleigh Ride.
The leg.
Okay, no, that one's definitely fun too, because you get the obvious intention of sleigh there. We have a
Yeah,
film called Santa's Sleigh out there, which we're definitely going to be covering on future
Bill Goldberg.
Decembers to Dismembers. Yes,
Hey,
and there's actually a sly reference that I have in my casting. Not Bill Goldberg, I'll tell you this right now. But I do have a fun casting that I don't think you're going to see coming. But I think that just doing some research, some light research, he fits the build for this character. Now, kind of moving past the title, we'll just kind of give you guys a brief overview of what exactly this story would entail. Obviously, we've said it enough here already that Billy and Ricky are back. We have decided that neither Billy nor Ricky are completely dead. And I will admit I did kind of take the stab at kind of formulating the bones to this, and Luke is just kind of going to be filling in the meat and potatoes and the guts as we go along here. So to lay out the structure and the works, we would pick up this film starting off with the night that Ricky and Billy's parents were killed, just like in the first film. It would be completely recast and reshot, the way that I thought about it, and I would love to do it, and I didn't tell you this, but the way that I want to do it would be very much like the original Halloween, but from Billy's perspective. So he's hiding in the bushes. We see the killer Santa Claus kind of doing his thing. He gets Billy, he pulls him up, and then a cop car rolls up. They arrest the man as they're doing it, Billy's just kind of off to the side. He stumbles over to his parents. We see them dead through his eyes. We hear his brother Ricky crying because, of course, he's the baby. And we see him go for a knife that the killer Santa Claus had, and he slashes the killer Santa Claus on the face, and that's when he is apprehended and put down by the police, basically just to get the knife out of his hand. I think it's important to kind of push that forward to where our story goes. So I thought like kind of engaging with that opening, which, even in our review, I said was really impactful, really tough stuff. I think kind of getting back to that formula of just saying, hey, let's start with a bang. It's going back to the darkness of this series, because the series does get goofy. And I mean, even in 2, they really get goofy. But I think that, that first one did have a better balance of showing the dark stuff as well as having some kind of fun, silly Santa Claus horror in a way.
yeah, and I think it's important to kind of show the audience where this is coming from, because I think you will still get people who still haven't seen the original two and then are coming to the theater to see this, pseudo slash remake, sequel, whatever you want to call it. So you kind of have to use that as the standpoint from not every audience member is going to know Silent Night, Deadly Night. Plus, this not being so iconic as something like Halloween, you're definitely going to want to have that kind of that trigger that it's going to either make people remember or it's going to fill people in to say, okay, I can be part of this ride to get to where we're going, because I think that's important. We talked about it in that original review of Silent Night, Deadly Night. Such an impactful. I was not expecting that subject matter, and it's such a good idea in that tone, and that's where we'll probably get into director a little bit later, where it kind of was like a toss up for me, where that first film, trying to put both these in here. That first film is pretty serious for the most part. The second one comes, there's so many memes made about it now, and the tone is a little bit different. So it's kind of, that's where I think coming into this and trying to combine both those tones into this new film is really where you kind of dance around a little bit, because you don't know exactly what tone you're going to be taking.
100%. And so moving on from there, we kind of get into just a little flavor I wanted to throw in there. I had the idea of basically going and recreating news clippings and old police reports and news coverage of the first two films, so the events of that, so all the murders and hearing, and we kind of lay Easter eggs in there that neither of the killers are dead, and then we would open up basically showing Ricky, who's now much older, because obviously I don't know if we'd set this in the current day. We'd kind of have to sit down and work out the timeline from there, but it would be something where it's a bit more modern. So even if we had to set this in the early 2000s or even the early 2010s, that'd be fine. But that's kind of the gist of where we're at. And at that point, we see Ricky is been mildly reformed. He is permanently in this asylum. It is basically a local, more in town, I guess you'd say, asylum. It's not like a maximum security type deal. He is a janitor for them, basically. Like, he does a lot of cleaning. He seemed to find peace. He seems friendly. It's very different than where we left off with him. And one of the big triggers here is we notice that somebody comes in wearing red and it doesn't trigger him. So it's something where it seems like he's moved past that. Then we kind of get to see the Billy side of things, where they're moving a bunch of, I guess you'd call them patients, from an upstate maximum security, kind of experimental asylum-like place. And they're moving them and the doctor, or the head of it, to this more local asylum because funding was cut. And we'll get into more of that. There's a little bit more of an angle here. And that is how Billy and Ricky end up meeting back up. They now share the same asylum. And the beauty of that is Ricky was adopted in Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. So, I like to kind of push it in there that, and there's a reason that this doesn't get brought up. You'd think that they kind of have some red tape over it, that it was almost, in a way, and I know, don't jump out of your pants here just yet. I'm going to do it a little better. In a Dr. Sartain kind of way, of bringing both Billy and Ricky together. It's almost off the books that they were siblings at this point, just kind of lost in the adoption system and everything, the foster system, you should say. And, that's kind of where I want to set the stage is, they do end up meeting. We find out that this doctor from the maximum security place, who I couldn't think of a real clever name, so I just call him Dr. Kringle. He is basically been torturing Billy for years, trying to not necessarily reform him, but just find out what makes him tick. And you find out that he's been locking him in padded cells filled with Christmas memorabilia, lights, Santa Clauses, all kinds of shit, and just torturing the man. So he is in a much darker place than even he was in the first film. He never really left that horror, as opposed to Ricky, who did get some actual help and care that he needed. So I wanted there to be this kind of juxtaposition there between these two characters. So I'll kind of throw it over to you for a minute before I continue on with a little bit more what I have.
No, I think it's interesting stuff. Because it's where you have to see these characters a little bit later in time. You know what I mean? So to kind of see where they're going and where it's kind of led them. And I think that's probably the biggest issue is trying to get them back together. And like I said, I didn't really come up with a full on pitch or anything like that. But just kind of leaving where we were with the original Silent Night, Deadly Night, as well as part two. I think the beauty there is, at least from my perspective, where that it leaves it so open ended. Like for me, part two ends almost like the original Halloween does, where in my head, Ricky just got up and he left. You know what I mean? He opens his eyes, no one's out there. He gets up and he's gone. And from my perspective, from a writing standpoint, that leaves the possibilities open. You know what I mean? So it's like, for me, I think it'd be intriguing to almost have Ricky out of the system completely, and we don't know where he is. And I think, like I said, I didn't fully come up with anything. I kind of have these little grains of ideas in terms of getting him back in, because I think that's the hardest part is getting these brothers back together. And for me, I like the idea of Billy, and because we don't really see him after one, he's shot, and it's like, okay, assume dead. I think it would be interesting almost to have Billy comatose, and he's been comatose since that whole thing, almost like a Michael Myers in the system, and like how you're saying, almost like how a doctor's been torturing him. I think that would be a very interesting take, where it's like if he's been comatose and he's almost trying to get a rise out of him, but anything that he's doing is just not working. You know what I mean? So, but he's been taking it all in, and what you would find out later on is that he's been absorbing everything. It's not like he's been just vacant and his mind isn't there. He's just been waiting, almost like a Michael Myers type. I think would be interesting.
No, I do like that. I definitely think we could play with that too. Definitely kind of show maybe some progression of time where we see maybe we can meld that idea together where Ricky was on the run and then he was captured, or maybe Billy was in a coma after his surgeries and after getting kind of put back together there.
And there's something here as we're talking. You're gonna, I know, go deeper into yours, and then I want to talk about something.
Okay, because I was just going to basically skip right to really the tipping point here.
Yeah.
Where, in this more toned down kind of facility, they do have access to things like newspapers and, television and things like that. So at one point, Ricky and Billy, after they've kind of realized who one another is and they've started to kind of reconcile a bit, we see that Billy is very dark, very tight-lipped. He doesn't talk much, and as to where Ricky, he's kind of now battling with this because now he's getting a flood back to his past with his brother being there, but he's also the new Ricky. He's also a bit more reformed, so we see him kind of act out a little bit. But what the tipping point comes to is when they find out on the news that the man who murdered their mother and father that Christmas Eve all those years ago is being released from prison, all due to the recently elected mayor, who is his brother, who we then find out ran his campaign basically saying that, there's corruption in the local police and he was going to uncover it and he was going to bring it to light. And he basically won his election on that. And one of the first things that he does is he gets his brother out of prison by saying that there was evidence that was left out of the case. And basically they try to pin it all on at least this, that the murder at the gas station was never his brother, because I assume there were no like cameras or anything at the time. So it was just kind of hearsay. It was just kind of what they could throw together. And then that they were going to say that his car had broken down and the couple had come to help him, but the boy had basically gone nutso and stole his gun, shot his father, and murdered his mom. Real out there, you know, you'd have to be a fucking dumbass to even put that together, but that's what they did. And because of the way the power dynamic and struggle is in this small town, it actually all came together. And he ends up getting his brother released. So, you know, now Ricky and Billy see this, and that's the final straw for them. It's now Christmas Eve then. It's the anniversary of their parents' death, and they see this, and that's when everything starts to unravel. And then I have this great sequence where they break out of the asylum. They start getting inmates out. They end up basically torturing and murdering Dr. Kringle, because I want them to have some interactions, especially with him kind of being in the background talking about how, you know, his intention of kind of using the closure of his facility as a positive, that now he's closer to Ricky, and now he can kind of see these two interact and everything. But I had this whole thing where maybe they you know like kind of run Christmas lights through his flesh and kind of string him up in this like massive lunchroom cafeteria area, and they just start kind of fucking with him. It's real brutal, real holiday style, and they basically, once they get out of the asylum, it's just Ricky and Billy on a warpath, making their way to the mayor's home, where they are going to finally seek revenge on the person who killed their parents and basically set them on this path. And, you know, you had brought up something before you get into your spiel, was that you had, when I first pitched this, you said, oh, we're making them good guys. And I don't see it as that. They are tragic characters. They've always been tragic characters in my eyes. But it is one of those things where they are now basically at a point where, you know, Ricky, we see him in a reformed state. We see that they can be saved. Billy never got that chance. And now that the basically the cork has been undone, they go back to their old ways. There's a lot of naughties. There's a lot of punish. Like, one line that I kind of came up with was, I want them to kind of say, you know, this whole town is naughty and they need to be punished, kind of deal. So it's like they see everybody as their enemy. Everybody has been put them against them. So they do walk that line of being sympathetic, but quickly you start to see them as the bad guys as we go along.
Yeah, I think that's fine. My concern was, you know, almost putting that embodiment of a villain in front of them, juxtaposing. We have the villain here technically, and now makes them the pseudo good guys for a little bit, where it's like almost putting that in front of a villain, a certified villain in front of a Michael Myers or a Jason Voorhees, and it almost become the dynamic by default becomes good guy versus bad guy. But I like the way where this is going. Like, as you're talking about it, I'm starting to think about different things, and like having Ricky. For me, like I had told you, I was thinking about Ricky being that outside force and almost weaving his way in. And I think for me, like when we talk about casting and things, I thought about this in a current time. Um, and as you were talking about like funding and things like that, I thought maybe it'd be interesting to use COVID as well, where it's like, you know, there were people that were getting, and you know, they didn't have the means to pack people in, so they had to kind of release people, you know, or almost shift in terms of things. And like for in my head, where Billy would be comatose, maybe he ends up being a lighter, you know, he's not a risk. So it's like he hasn't done anything for years. Let's put him somewhere. And then Ricky figures this out. You know what I mean? So coming in as that force of you know, maybe he's posing as a doctor or whatever we want to say, to kind of get his brother out. This is, like you're saying, the anniversary and everything like that. So he's coming in, he's doing the groundwork. We don't really know exactly who this is at first, but then as he finally gets to his brother, I like the idea of him just wheeling him out. You know what I mean? There's no ceremony. It's just Ricky. For me, putting Billy and Ricky together, Ricky's always been that more flamboyant, more personality. You know, the garbage day deal. You know what I mean? So it's like he's been the more suave kind of character, and I would want to play that up in terms of you know, putting these two together. So he's been kind of planning this, and I would love the idea of almost wheeling him into a van, and still comatose. And as Ricky's talking to him, giving him, his spiel of every little thing, and he's still not getting anything out of his brother, he's like, hold on, I got you a Christmas present. And going back to where you had said he had cut the gentleman on the face, we get somewhere, he unwheels him, and there's a man laying there with a cut on his face. He says, here we go, gives him the axe, and that's when Billy stands up, and we're
I
ready to
like that.
go.
I like both interpretations of this. Yours I feel is a bit more subtle, as mine is a little bit more bombastic in the sense.
Yeah,
I like the idea of kind of the patients overtake the asylum kind of deal with this, because I think mine goes for that more crescendo style of film where it's like I look at this as a trilogy and
yeah,
I want this to be the big, moment for both of them. But I do like that subtlety of it where it's like Ricky has been kind of this charismatic mastermind who's been almost building this all up this whole time just to get his brother back. And he's slowly bringing his brother out of, the comatose state that he was in.
yeah. And
And if you put the Dr. Kringle stuff in there, and then kind of have him be someone that they can take out as well, where he
yeah,
has been torturing Billy in his comatose state, trying to get a reaction out of him. That's also good stuff there.
yeah.
So,
So I mean, and that's why I think the beauty of this kind of franchise is there are so many different directions you can take this in.
mhm.
And I think they all work, because even melding Ricky into that situation and to wreak havoc on this mental facility and facilitating mental patients overtaking it also melds really well into both these stories.
Mhm. And so, where my story would kind of lead, I have a couple of set pieces that I did want to kind of express. No real serious detail here. Obviously, I have external characters that I do want to set into it. We have the brother and the mayor, well, the mayor and his brother. We see a little bit of their home life. We see that the older brother was the one who went to jail, who was the murderer, and I want to see their dynamic at hand here. I'll still save my casting here for a minute. We'll kind of save that for the last section here that we're doing. But it is one of those things where I love the idea of him being a crooked man who loves his misguided brother and will pull strings where he has to make sure that he is safe and in his control. He is a composed exterior, but we do see once we get a little deeper that he is a bit of a ball of mess, stress, and guilt once we kind of dive into him. And then obviously the murderer himself, he is, and all I put there was basically the backstory for that. So I don't really get too deep into it. He does kind of have that attitude of he believes his own lies in a way. I like the idea of him being so confident in the fact that no, I didn't kill those people. It's like he can't even be honest with his brother who went through all of this to set this up. It's just this is what happened. This is the life I'm living, and I'm just going to keep on going. Yeah, I may have lost 20 years or so in the tank, but I'm back out, baby, and I'm ready to celebrate Christmas. It's kind of the attitude that I have for him. And then I have other characters like a sheriff character, of course. They are also they were never a local to the town. They're also a recent addition, but they're no nonsense. I do have them being cast as a female, so I am pretty happy with the casting I have there. We'll get into that, like I said, in a little bit. And then I actually do introduce a character from the first Silent Night, Deadly Night. One that we kind of thought we'd see something from. Box Cutter Girl
Yeah.
is kind of she's a local college student who is working to be a journalist, and she kind of runs almost like a blog or like a true crime kind of maybe even a YouTube channel or something herself, where she's got a lot of traction. And this being such a close case to herself, she gets a lot of hits and traction from that. So the idea that this murderer who kind of spun off this whole thing with Ricky and Billy and got her babysitter killed, it means a lot to her. So she does do a lot of diving into the mayor and trying to figure out, where this evidence came from, because she's real familiar with the case. So she's kind of our catalyst in the sense of, well, there's this new evidence that has never been brought up. No one's ever talked about it. police corruption. I mean, they were two really stand-up cops. It just doesn't make any sense for them to kind of be, misguiding evidence and trying to frame this guy, even if it was for these kids. So it's just kind of like she's kind of poking holes and everything. And she will cross paths later on with Billy and Ricky, and they don't necessarily take too kind to her. I love this moment where, like I said, Billy's more of a stoic character, but I envision this moment where maybe she tries to appease to him, and she kind of still has the box cutter
Yeah.
that he gave her, and he hands it to Billy, and Billy he does have an understanding there, but before he can make a decision, Ricky comes in and starts trying to kill her. And it's kind of like, it just shows at that point, I want to show really that all the progress that Ricky has made has kind of started to slip away,
Mm.
and that he's really just back to his old self, being real kooky and out there. And I really want to play with those dynamics a lot.
No, yeah, and that's where I think it would be interesting is kind of where I said kind of Ricky and Billy are two different personalities. I feel at least presented in these films, where Billy's a little more subtle and reserved, where Ricky is just off the wall crazy. Given both their performances, so I think that dynamic is very interesting, and almost just having a deterioration between almost the relationship between the two. Um, Kind of going throughout, as they start off as this very solid dynamic, and then kind of varying personalities, even though they are brothers. Brothers don't always get along. So,
Mhm.
kind of going throughout and having these different moments of, is it going to happen now? No, is it going to happen? You know what I mean? And all this kind of tension that they build, because I think eventually, yes, the money's in the team up, and also I think the money's in an eventual feud between the two.
Absolutely. And, I do kind of want to play into that a little bit towards the end. One other set piece before we get into the kind of the ending, and then we'll start talking about casting and directors and everything, is I do have a sequence where I want there to be this whole little side plot of, not necessarily a side plot, but something that's kind of funny, is there's, of course, this fire station that the boys come across, and there's this fire chief there who's doing a little something shady with the whole, you know, uh, they usually do those raffles, those drives, like Toys for Tots. And I
Yeah.
have this whole thing where, because the mayor isn't really doing his job, they're losing funding there. And you brought up COVID, so that could also play something into it, where they haven't really like, I also had the idea of maybe having kind of like inflation play a role
Yeah.
into it, to where like he hasn't been able to, keep up with his payments on things. I have this whole thing where he's divorced, so it's like, he has custody payments and things like that he has to pay for, child support, and times are getting tough. So he decides to take the Toys for Tots stuff, and his intentions are to sell the toys on eBay to make up some cash and things like that. And I try to frame him as more of a sympathetic character. He doesn't necessarily want to do this, but he feels like his hands are tied. But he does get, I think, one of the cooler sequences where the two gentlemen show up to, well, I mean, our two guys, Billy and Ricky, show up to the firehouse, and they do have a brawl with firefighters. Very Halloween 2, except, or Halloween Kills, not covered in flames, but they do have a knockdown drag out with them. I thought that it'd be cool to have this character be more of like a put together, buffer, taller kind of guy, and he also uses a fire axe towards the end. So we have three axes going at each other, and I love the idea of having Ricky and Billy, even though the odds are almost insurmountable for them, they take this guy out, and I love the idea of them like both jamming their axes into him, and having him kind of like up against a wall or something, with both his shoulders being cut into, and he's just hanging there, and then maybe they use like the jaws of life or something, and they just crush his skull, kind of thing. Like, I have like some playful moments there. That is the fun bit of casting that I'm excited to drop on you. I'm curious to see what you think, because obviously I'm pulling out of my element here a little bit from this, but we'll see.
And going into, it's funny you bring up the fireman situation there in the firehouse because as I was pitching the sleigh ride thing, I was like, it would be fun if their vehicle of choice was a fire truck. And
Mhm.
I think that would be hilariously fun to see them grab this fire truck and as they're going to go wreak havoc. It's one of those things where very weird for me to mention this film as we're talking about Silent Night, Deadly Night, but Dunkirk, where where they use the planes, and the audio of
Yeah.
those coming in, and it would be so much fun to have that siren going off to townspeople, thinking, normally it is something of, something on fire. It's an sound of relief, but now it's a sign. It's a sound of terror as the brothers are coming with their axes, ready to take on the rest of the town. I think that would be a lot of fun.
No, I do like that. I had thought about incorporating the fire trucks at some point to kind of get us to the third act crescendo. But I love that you did, because then I can also say, like, maybe at one point we got Ricky through a town square, taking from the remake, in a sense. Maybe there's a big parade going on downtown, and maybe they're spraying guests with the fire hose and stuff, blowing them away with that and everything on top of the truck. Just fun stuff like that where they're really just causing havoc.
Yes.
And of course it all kind of leads up to them getting to the mayor's house, where they do get their revenge on the the murderer. I do think that would be a great place to have them kind of have a little bit of separation where they do clash a bit. I think that would be the most appropriate place. It could be over the sense of who gets to kill him, or it could be the sense of, is this really going to do anything for us? I would have to really sit down and think about that, but I feel like that would be the most appropriate place for a clash
Yeah.
between the two. And then basically, with all this getting started up, I have this idea that the National Guard will get called in, backups from other towns. Basically, it gets flooded with guns and police, and they find their way to Ira's toy store, which is still around, and they end up holding out in there. They have a couple moments of reconciliation, and I said this would be their Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid moment, where they both go out and they start fighting for their life as they just get gunned down. And I love the idea of having that song. They used it in the Violent Night trailer. The Christmas, the snow's
Yeah.
coming down. That song playing as they're getting shot to death. And that kind of leads us into the credits. It doesn't have to be this huge thing, but like, I want to put that finality on them where they are shot to shit. There's no qualms about it. They ain't coming back. But they put this final crescendo on it, because it's like, really, you can't do anything after this. They get their revenge. Their story arc is complete, and they are the moment I want them to do is they go out as brothers. They go out as these people who were victimized and put in a situation far too young to really do anything about it, and they're victims of trauma, in a sense, because that's really what the heart, I believe, of the first film was,
Yeah.
is that Billy, he never wanted to be a serial killer. His intentions were good, but nobody took him serious,
Yeah.
and he was just constantly abused by the system. And you could say the same thing for two, although not as well executed. It's the same shit, and I think that having them go out almost in their eyes on top, they completed their mission. This is their last Christmas, and they go out in a blaze of glory. And I want it to be gory and gross. Of course, they're going to get a couple licks in before they fully go, because I want them to have that Michael Myers kind of attitude of, like, they'll get shot, but for some reason they're still going, and it's
Yeah.
not until they're absolutely completely obliterated that they go down. So
No, I think that's good to have that finality on it. I think for me, I would love to see them right off in the sunset. I think when we talked about that Silent Night remake, one of my favorite parts was him just driving off and
I
saying,
love that too.
what could be?" And for me, I would absolutely love if we think the brothers are dead, they get away somehow, and that last scene is just them hopping into a car all fucked up, and they just drive out of town during a snowstorm, and it's like no clue where they're gonna go. what they're gonna do, but the possibility is there. Billy and Ricky ride once again as brothers, and we could see them down the line at a later date.
I like both. I mean, I do
Yeah,
like the
you
idea of
can
them
work either
riding off
way.
into a snowstorm. And I think that this is a lot of fun, and I do like that. That's kind of where we differ with it too, because you're getting two lines of thinking here.
Yep.
I think again, your story is much more subtle, much more in that sense of like we're playing into the wit of these characters a little bit more, and mine, of course, is a bit more showy and bombastic and kind of more of a finale. But yours still leaves that door open to say there could be more.
Yeah.
And I do love that, and I agree. We agreed on that with the remake, that we
Yep.
loved um how they ended that. The only reason I wouldn't go with that personally is just because with the remake it is a different character. It's a different story. With this being Billy and Ricky, I just again I think that finality for me is really what I would look for. But again, either way works. I would
Yeah.
still think that it would be a nice ending, it'd be poetic. I just feel like I could see people freaking out about how it's like, well, how could they survive all those gunshots and blah blah blah? Because it's like they're not Michael Myers at the end of the day. I mean, we do have them both be resuscitated from shotgun blasts and pistol blasts and stuff, but hey, I think we can get away with that once in this series.
I say go balls to the wall. Let's have him
There you go.
reattach his head after it gets blown off.
There we go. I even at one point had this idea of maybe even referencing that Dr. Kringle's ulterior motive would be to rewire Billy's brain.
Oh, there we
And
go.
you have a reference to the dome, like he
There we
would
go.
show that tool.
Got like a
And then,
drawing.
yeah, and maybe when he's all strung up with the lamps, maybe he puts that on the doctor and that's how he kills him. I have some fun little nods to things
There we
like
go.
that. Like I said, we're throwing Peto's Toy Store in there and stuff. But all right, I think we can get into some casting. Obviously, of course, let's start off with who's directing this film for you, Luke. What's your pick?
Oh well, I had a couple where I think Michael Dougherty could be an interesting choice for this. For me, like that. For me, I think that's a safe choice. Where it's like, I think he could do really well from a previous property like that. I mean, he gets the tones down. Krampus, obviously great. Great Christmas themed horror film. So that really what got my mind going. I mean, he's created Sam, and the trick or treat stuff is so iconic. I think if you have him take a property like this, I think he can really breathe some life into it and make it his own. I think that would be a lot of fun. My unsafe choice, and I said this earlier, where we are trying to meld two different almost tones here, where we have the kind of straight up serious horror in the first film, not really comedic at all, and then the second film more comical undertones, so it's trying to mix all this stuff in. And where did my brain instantly go after watching things like Baby Driver, Last Night in
Wow.
Soho?
Okay.
I think an Edgar Wright, it could put in perfect comical undertones while mixing horror in this. I think it would be very interesting.
That's a very good pick. We didn't talk about this beforehand. I think we need to preface that because my pick was Michael Dougherty. Honestly, it was an easy choice. He balances the horror and the spirit of holidays so well. I mean, like he felt like the best person to take this on. Again, you say with Krampus, even I say with Trick or Treat, because
Yep.
that film is both equal parts touching, heartwarming in some aspects, but scary and dark. And I think that really, I think he'd have the teeth to kind of take this story on in my incarnation of it. If I was to hand him this story, I
Yep.
think that he could bring it to the screen in the most faithful way. But God, I love that choice for Edgar Wright. I think that is also something I didn't think about. And he would also, I think, really play into that really well of striking that balance, because I think of things like Shaun of the Dead and Hot
Yep.
Fuzz and stuff where they do lean a little more comedy than I'd like. But I know with his work with Last Night in Soho, which I haven't seen yet, I want
It's
to.
great.
I've heard that, but just from that trailer alone, I can tell that I'm pretty sure he leans a little out of the comedy with that one.
And we get
And
into pretty good horror toward the end of that film, and I think it works really well.
yeah, I just know him as a creative. I'd love to see him go with it. Another one that I had at first, just to play into kind of the darker aspect of it, but I don't necessarily know. I think with Green Room, he kind of shows us, but Jeremy Saulnier
Yeah,
was another one that I thought he could do a good, a nice balance. But that was a brief glimpse. And again, I look to Green Room and Blue Ruin for that
yeah,
for the most
yep.
part.
He could put a
And then
unique stamp on it, I think.
yes, and um, there was something that was telling me at one point that maybe you would say Joe Bagos, but then I was thinking, I honestly, I don't want him to make these characters like
Yeah.
Joe Bagos characters.
Yeah, he
But
got his shot with Christmas Bloody Christmas. I think that works as his unique property just
yes,
fine. I don't think he's got to revisit Christmas themes.
that's where my head was too, as opposed to where it's like I would like to see Michael Dougherty take on more Christmas stories.
Yep.
But like another one that I thought of, primarily for, I think The Guest was my Adam Wingard.
Oh yeah, that
He
could be
doesn't
interesting
always he
too.
doesn't
Yeah.
always hit for me, and I don't know if this is the right property for him. But I think The Guest and Your Next are still so strong. And I think that they would definitely show that nice balancing of comedy and horror. Of course, I'm an avid Godzilla lover, so Kong versus Godzilla is nice, but that's such a bombastic, huge spectacle film.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really play to those sensibilities that I look for into them. So if you're sitting there going, I don't know about that one, think more Adam Wingard in the realm of The Guest and Your Next.
Yeah. No, I think that could work too.
Awesome. And then we'll kind of get into some casting. Obviously, let's start with Billy and Ricky here. Now, I'm gonna go first since I let you take director on that one. But
Okay.
I am going with Billy. I'm gonna go with Ben Foster.
Okay. That could be an interesting.
Yeah,
That could be a really interesting choice, actually.
yeah. I think that he's proven himself to be a very competent actor. He does have that kind of stoic look to him. And
He
I was
loses
trying
himself in
to.
roles.
He
You
does.
know.
And with the interpretation of Billy as this traumatized man that we were both kind of going for, I kind of wanted to really lean into that a bit and kind of say, hey, this is what I'd like to do with him, and I think that he'd be the best actor to execute it. Again, these are recasts, so it's not like
Yeah.
I'm not looking for people that look like these old actors,
Yep.
but people who were similar enough and I think could play it. I'm looking for somebody with a little bit of that bombastic edge, but still has that kind of good balance where it's like to show the lighter side of Ricky, the reform side, but can still go crazy and still have that kind of out there crazy edge to it that kind of resembles a Ben Foster type.
Yeah.
I went Aaron Paul.
Oh, that could be interesting.
Yes. So I thought that those two would be my Ricky and my Billy.
Especially, after Breaking Bad. I think he's got that range to really bring that personality there and really sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that'd be an interesting dynamic between those two, actually. Just because Ben Foster can fly off the handle, in certain roles as well. So it'd be interesting to kind of see them act off one another, because they can both get there. You know what I mean? Where
Mm-hmm.
lose themselves in the moment. So I think that would that dynamic could create some really interesting kind of interplay between the two brothers.
Yeah, and of course you're gonna get the classic garbage day line at some point in there, but also I'm going to have Aaron Paul drop the bitch at least once.
There we
You
go.
got
You
to.
have to Gatorade me, bitch.
There you go. But alrighty, what are your picks for Ricky and Billy there?
All right. So for Billy, and I'm playing with the more reserved versus the more flamboyant dynamic. And again, this would be contemporary time. So I was looking in terms of actors' age as well to kind of match up to where this would really go. So as I was looking at it, for my pick for Billy, I wanted someone a little more reserved, but also at times can really show his teeth in certain instances. It's because if I'm talking about the comatose state, I think he's got to sell that for a little bit, and then once he starts coming out you have to build toward that madman dynamic, but not as much as Ricky. You know, so there has to be almost a pullback a little bit. I
100%.
had to go a man that's got a little bit of horror cred in the community as well, Leaf Schreiber. I think that could be an
Okay.
interesting a dynamic of seeing him just comatose straight up in that wheelchair, and then being the straight man almost to my Ricky. So I think he could play off. I think he could play that Billy role pretty interestingly.
I do like that. I almost cast him in another role that I have in
Oh,
my film here. But no, I do like Leaf Schreiber. Obviously, he's got some fame with things like Scream and other roles here. But yeah, no, he definitely has that stoic dynamic to him, a little bit more reserved. But if he needs to fly off the handle, I totally could see him as a force to be reckoned
yeah.
with, too.
And then for my Ricky, which is really going to sell my Leaf Schreiber casting here, and as I was looking at Edgar Wright, you know, I get the Baby Driver vibes here. I went John Hamm. I think that could
Okay.
be interesting in terms of really that flamboyant kind of assholishness that we get, especially in Baby Driver with John Hamm's character. As we like him and then we also hate him. I think John Hamm can really bring that, especially in my head of him trying to sell and trying to get his brother out of the
Asylum
mental
and
health
having that
facility.
charisma and everything.
Yeah, and kind of losing himself in that role of pretending to be a doctor and then trying to get his brother out of that comatose state of like, come on, trying to pull him back in. And then as soon as they're both doing it, I can see John Hamm outplaying Elise Schreiber and really being that flamboyant killer.
Perfect. And then I, of course, laid out a few more of my characters that I did mention here. So Box Cutter Girl, I have actually a an alum to your directors there, or your director, I should say, Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
There we go.
I think that she's just a great force. I mean, maybe the age wouldn't work necessarily, but I was just thinking for acting prowess.
Yeah.
For my sheriff character, I'm going Tony Collette because I
Okay.
wanted to have a couple of people that Michael Dougherty had worked with before, and obviously she's from Krampus.
Yep.
And I think that she speaks for herself. I mean, Tony Collette is a fantastic actress, but I think that she also can carry that kind of demeanor of being a bit of a hard ass when she needs to be. And I think that she would play that really well as the sheriff of this town.
Absolutely. I
Um,
think that's interesting casting, I think. Because she can be serious and she can be fun as well.
mhm.
So,
And this one, very interesting. Again, I wanted, because they're brothers, I wanted them to be similar in nature. So I went with, for the our murderer here and the mayor. And I also thought of I didn't want to go with all the crazy out there casting either. I wasn't going to sit here and say Bruce Willis for this, even though he is retired, obviously. Denzel Washington for this. I wasn't going to do that kind of thing.
mhm.
But for my murderer and my mayor, I have for the murderer Gary Sinise.
Okay, yeah. That would be interesting.
I thought that he obviously brings a little bit to the table there.
Yep.
He's a bit older, and then for his brother, the mayor, I have Barry Pepper.
Ah, Barry Pepper. That would be
Yeah,
interesting. I don't see him in enough things anymore. What was
I
last
know.
time?
Yeah,
A
and he was
Crawl?
Crawl. I think was the last thing I saw him in
Yeah.
too. I've always loved him. So it's like I just think that they not only looks wise, do they have a similar kind of demeanor, but I think that they could both play those roles really well. Gary Sinise, especially in his earlier career, was definitely a little bit more. He's pretty good at playing that kind of crazier, kind of psychotic role in a
Yeah.
sense, and I thought that he'd be great. And of course, Barry Pepper, I think, can button it up pretty nice. I mean, he's definitely got some roles where he's flying off the handle a bit, but he can button it up real nice, play that politician with a bit of a darker edge, I feel.
Absolutely.
And then that brings us to Dr. Kringle, who another Doherty alum. I have Dylan Baker.
Oh, that would be fun,
Yeah.
actually.
So I have those two as that. And that brings me to another character. I didn't mention him much, but he was the warden to the actual asylum that Ricky was at. This is another reference. We won't see him much, but I figured, I wanted him to have a little bit of a softer edge to him. Not necessarily be like a warden type of, not being a dickhead or an asshole. The way I have it described here is a well-natured clinical psychiatrist who's always doing what he can to bring the best in his patients. He is responsible for the new leaf that Ricky has turned in his time there, and I'm giving that to Clint Howard.
Oh boy.
I know, right? I was just like, I knew that one would be kind of controversial, but I
Have
figure
him
the
eating out of
guy's
the
in.
garbage.
He's no, I'm not gonna have him eating out of the garbage, but I figure he's older. There's two. He's in two of these films. Again, it's a nice reference. It's not a huge role, but it is something where he shows up for a minute. He is one of the only people that actually not escape, but he does leave the asylum to, in my mind, to go celebrate Christmas with his family. And that's where he kind of has his last little confrontation with Dr. Kringle, where Dr. Kringle, I want him to almost say, I'm going to run you out of this asylum, everything like that. I'm going to turn this place into like this avant-garde medical, utopia in a sense, because that's the kind of character I want Dr. Kringle to be. He
Yeah.
spends the whole day sniffing his own farts. Now, the fun one, the real fun one, I mentioned the fire chief, okay? I needed somebody with, some brawn. I like this, especially in, what I was able to find in recent photos and things like that. He fit that look for me, with the white hair and everything. And I just picture him in like kind of like a burgundy shirt with the almost the Santa Claus kind of get up, but it's like their fire pants kind of thing. And he's just fighting with axes. I'm going with Kevin Nash as the
There
fire
we
chief.
are. I love it.
Yeah, so
You can't go wrong with Kevin Nash. Dude's
and
7 feet tall.
I
So
was hoping you would say that because I saw that and I was like, yeah, he'd be a big motherfucker. And I'm just like, that would be awesome. I've recognized him in a couple of things over the years, and it was just one of those things where I'm like, I knew when I made this character in my head, I was like, I want a wrestler. I
yeah.
almost cast another one. Oh my god, his name's escaping me. We just talked about him on Sunday Scaries.
Chris
Terrifier
Jericho?
2. Yeah, I almost did Chris Jericho, but I was like, that's a little too safe. He's in some horror
Yeah.
now. He's going to be in another one. I was like, that was almost like I would have felt a little bit like he does have that stature, but when I saw the pictures of Kevin Nash and I remembered who
He's
he was,
imposing. He's
I was
huge.
just like, yeah, he's
And
massive.
he's got that weathered Sam Elliott look. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
If I couldn't get him, obviously, I would want to go with someone else who has, he's not a wrestler, but he has some ties to horror, and he's in a bunch of stuff. Stephen Lang, I think, would also
that would
fit
work.
that
Yep.
role really well. I want that clean cut, kind of white beard, white hair aesthetic.
Yeah.
Older, kind of, everything. And even now I'm thinking about it, do firefighters get pensions? I believe they do,
I don't
like
know.
police. So you can tell us in the comments if they do or not. Maybe the reason for his nefarious purpose with the gifts is that maybe they get their pensions cut in a way they're not going to get as much for some reason, kind of thing. So it's like, that's really the angle I wanted to take with that. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think Kevin Nash would be my fire chief there, having that big battle in the fire station. So
That works. I know when you teased a pro wrestler, it got my brain going. I'd already doubled down on John Hamm as Ricky. I thought maybe you were going to pitch John Cena as Ricky. I think that
no,
would be funny as hell, though,
it
because
would be funny. But I don't know, man. I saw John Cena come up on when I was doing my research. I was like, I fucking love him. I fucking love him in Peacemaker.
mhm,
He does, and Suicide Squad. Like, he's definitely great with humor, but it just would have been, again, he's kind of hit that point in his career where it's like he's a lot like if I was to cast The Rock in a way,
yeah,
and I wanted my casting to be a bit more grounded, to the sense of like, I think that everybody that I cast, there is a chance that they could make it, and that's why like Toni Collette is a bigger actress nowadays, but because she's Michael Dougherty alum, I feel like that's an easier swing. But
yeah.
like, I think everybody else here is pretty reasonable.
Yep.
I cast a lot of character actors, people that I just know from their stints in horror or just smaller films in general, like Barry Pepper and Gary Sinise, and Aaron Paul and Ben Foster, um, and obviously Clint Howard. Unless he's only working with his brother these days, I think we could get him.
Yeah.
And then Kevin Nash. I don't know really where he's at with acting these days, but I think we could swing him. I think there's a chance. So,
I think it'll all work out.
oh yeah. But alrighty, yeah, that's now to kind of close this thing up. I know we went a little bit longer than we anticipated on this video, but I think this was nice.
Oh, I think this was great.
This was a lot of fun. I hope you guys are enjoying it. But yeah, Luke, you got any final thoughts for me on our Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3 or the unmade sequels?
Well, what a long, winding road we've been down here. I think
Hmm.
everything we've pitched today has been immensely better than a lot of things that we've seen in this franchise. The possibilities coming out of 2 were endless, and they kind of really fumbled it going into 3 and didn't really know where to go. And it certainly feels like that. We had a couple glimmers of hope. We had the Toy Maker, which uh, not a fantastic film, but definitely when we're talking about the installments in Silent Night, Deadly Nights, definitely a shining moment, as well as that 2012 light remake in a sense. So overall, this franchise has been tough to get through, but overall, there were a few okay moments, I'd say.
Yeah, and when I pitched this as our first inaugural, December to Dismember, this was definitely intentional just because, again, we had things like Violent Night and The Mean One and Christmas Bloody Christmas, all kind of revealing around Santa or Santa like characters that are all kind of murdering. And, if you ask Luke, one of the things that I feel like at times can get annoying with me is that I'm a big person on synergy. I like when things are going on, kind of modernly or in horror at the moment. I try to run things together a bit. But also, my intent was because we had never seen these. So these were blind watches for us entirely. And it's kind of rare that we get to do that much. On the podcast, it's usually one of, obviously, who's picking it. Normally one of us has seen it. Now, I did a couple of blind picks for this. Were any of yours this year blind picks? I think you picked ones that you'd already seen.
For the Splattercast?
Yeah.
No, I think I had seen everything that I picked.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, for me, Hellraiser was a blind pick,
Hmm.
so something I had never seen, but I knew you had seen. So it's one
Yep.
of those things where it's like, and obviously that's a pretty safe bet. But it is one of those things where it's like, this was a rarity that we at least have an entire series that none of us have seen any of them. So I was just like, why not? And as we move forward with December to Dismember, I think this was quite a bit of fun. I mean, Luke, you did say that this was tough to get through with some of these sequels.
Oh, it's very tough. Something I
So
certainly don't want to relive, but
yes, but
we did it. We can say we did it. 2022 was a landmark year for Christmas and Silent Night, Deadly Night.
yes, and I do want to say that, like, for next year, I think we're gonna definitely have a bit of a variation. I don't think we'll stick to just one killer Santa Claus theme. We'll kind of spruce things up because there's a lot more. There, like, just talking about it, there's a whole ton more things that we love when it comes to this season. I mean, even just getting into this, there's a ton of killer Santa movies we didn't even talk about.
Hmm.
So it's one of those things where it's like we can always dive down that rabbit hole a little more. But obviously we talked about Michael Dougherty. He's got Krampus. We both adore that film, so it's something we could dive into that. And I know Krampus is one. He's got a ton of films too, like a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
different movies. But things like rare exports, I'd love to talk about and
absolutely.
stuff like that. It's Gremlins was something we talked, with Stephen Lamort about, was something that I want to talk about. There's just a lot of avenues we can take this every year, and I'm excited to do it. I love my holiday horror, and this was just a fun trip. Even though we didn't hit all winners here, I agree with you that the Toy Maker is at least something I'll go back and revisit. And damn, I will probably be picking up the 2012 remake on Blu-ray
Absolutely.
I enjoyed that quite a bit. I will definitely put that on my list of holiday horror to watch each year. I just think that movie's fun and it's what I was looking for. I'm curious to revisit after a year where maybe I can look at it with the eyes of not having seen Silent Night, Deadly Night 3 and 4 so recently after it. So what I feel, but I think that movie's just a ton of fun.
Absolutely.
100%. But alrighty, guys, it's going to wrap us up here for our Silent Night, Deadly Night unmade sequels, as well as the end of December to Dismember. We wish you guys a very Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is you celebrate. Obviously, we hope that you and your family are doing all right. We're doing pretty good ourselves. So we love celebrating this here with you. And, as we move forward, we got a lot to look forward to. So before I do the usual social media plugs, I mean, we have not only kind of an announcement video coming up here pretty soon within the new year, talking about restructuring some things on the channel, announcing some new stuff. We also have to look forward to midnight, first of the year. We'll be releasing our video of top 10 horror films of 2022. We'll each be giving a list, going through discussing this. I mean, it was a crazy year. It's
Very
the best
strong.
year we could have chosen to start doing this again. And I am looking forward to it. So I've already kind of been predetermining my list a little bit. And man, I think we'll have to do honorable mentions. I don't think we're going to do worst of the year. I know
No.
some people have done that in the past. I don't see it as necessary. If it doesn't show up on our list and we have a pretty negative review of it, you probably know how we feel about it.
Absolutely.
I just think that that's kind of where it lies. But yeah, best of the year for sure, with a couple of honorable mentions in there, probably with the stacked year we've had. But yeah, I'm excited for that. It's going to be a good deal of fun. And of course, we got a lot of other great videos planned for 2023. So look into that, guys. But yeah, other than that, you can check us out on all the latest and greatest on our social medias at SplattercastPod on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as check out all our other videos. Of course, we have a full series of Silent Night, Deadly Night reviews we just did over the last couple weeks. And of course, I'll plug it again, our interview with Stephen Lamort. Fantastic interview. Love that guy. He was real awesome to talk to. And then, of course, all new reviews for things like The Mean One, Christmas Bloody Christmas, and even our review of Violent Night, which God, feels like forever ago that we saw that movie,
Oh yeah.
and it's only been like a month. But yeah, and of course, we did have our live stream. As of recording this, we have yet to have it, but I'm sure it went well. And you can go back and check that out, where we are doing a little commentary watch along for Jack Frost. So lots of fun still to be had in the future, and lots of fun that's already been had. That's it. That's the end of my spiel. There's the crescendo. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.